This episode of Author Stories is brought to you by the Writing Mastery Academy. Founded by Jessica Brody, author of the best-selling plotting guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The Writing Mastery Academy features online, on-demand writing courses, including the official Save the Cat Writes a Novel companion course, novel fast drafting, crafting dynamic characters, and productivity hacks for writers, to name just a few, plus monthly live webinars on various writing topics. Go to jessicabrody.com/Hank to learn more and get your first month of unlimited access to all the content for just $6. That's right, just $6. jessicabrody.com/Hank.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Patry Francis on the show with me. She has an amazing new book. It's called All the Children Are Home, and I'm super excited to talk about this book today, Patry. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Hank, and thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Patry, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I have always wanted to be a writer. I don't even know how far back this goes. You know, when we'd be sitting on the porch with my cousin on a boring summer day, at the end of the summer, when you really run out of things to do, what should we do? Let's write a story. And nobody else thought this was fun but me. As a child, I didn't know any other writers. I grew up in a working class mill town where you were supposed to be tough. You weren't supposed to be around reading poetry, but that's what I like to do. And I used to go into my room and write these stories and poems from a very, very young age.
Were you a bookish kid? Were you one of those kids that always had your nose in a book?
I was, and I as I said, this was not very cool in the neighborhood where I grew up, so I had to be a little sensitive about it. I used to, be in class with, a novel or a poetry book under my math book, and it was very embarrassing to be caught.
That's so funny. Do you remember a specific book or a specific author or maybe a series of books that just completely transformed the way you think about stories and that let you, believe that you could be transported to a new place?
Well, as a child, I was one of these of the generation of Nancy Drew, and I loved Nancy Drew. The Secret of the Old Clock, that book really started me off. And then, as my taste improved a bit, I loved Little Women and Anne of Green Gables and all of that. So I just loved books, and I loved to read biographies. I loved to read about people who could do things that they never imagined they could do.
I've heard so many people on this show, and we've done, right at 1,100 episodes now, and so many people have said that Nancy Drew was their or the Hardy Boys, or that sort of vintage of stories was their gateway drug, if you want to. It's so funny that so many people have that similar experience. I love it.
Well, they had, she did a great job creating wonderful stories and very vivid, memorable, discrete characters, which are the first two skills a writer needs to learn. So
Absolutely. So, Patry, as happens with so many writers, early on you have the dream, the desire to tell stories, and inside you that somehow, some way, that this is going to be a reality for you. And then, the little thing, called life gets in the way, and you start raising a family, and you start, having to pay bills and all the things that come with, quote unquote adulthood. And the writing dream kind of gets pushed to the side while you do, important things. But somehow that desire has a way of coming back around. What was it that brought writing back around for you?
Well, it never totally went away. And I think for me, it comes down to just loving. I love to write for the joy of writing, and I think that has to be number one before you seek publication. And and I was always trying to, whatever little thing I'd write, I'd try to get it published. When I was in college, I didn't think being a writer was a real thing you could be. So I majored in everything else, but I kept taking writing courses. And ended up being a waitress who wrote, right? So I I was always writing poems and short stories and submitting them, and had a lot of success with that in my younger years. And then no, but I really wasn't able to dedicate myself to it full time until I sold my first novel. And by then I was in my mid 50s. So keep going out there, whoever you are.
Was that first novel The Liar's Diary?
It was. It was.
Do you remember what the I love to hear about the first ideas, that bring books to life, because it's sort of this, it's sort of like magic in a lot of ways. One moment, The Liar's Diary does not exist in any form, fashion. None of the characters are there. That it's a thing that does not exist. And then either a character comes into your mind. I like to say that they walk on the stage of your mind, or you read a newspaper story, and a magazine article, see something on the news, and it starts the what if game playing in your mind. And then all of a sudden, in one form or fashion, the Liar's Diary is a real thing. Now that you'll go through months and months of writing and discovering the story and the character arcs and all of that sort of stuff. But those are just revisions of a thing that just magically came into existence. What was that initial thought that brought this thing to life?
Well, it was, as you said, it is a sort of a magical, very much so. It's, where do these characters come from? They feel absolutely so real when you're writing them that it's hard for me to say that they're not. But for The Liar's Diary, it was reading an article. It was an article that was in the news story about a teenage boy who had sort of stalked and killed a neighbor, and he was considered a very good kid. And so I did, and everyone said so, and I just became intrigued how this could happen. And in The Liar's Diary, the teenage boy that I created, he was not capable of doing that, so he didn't end up being the murderer. But as you said, there's some sort of a starting point, and yeah, I compare it to when you get a new car. That I got a new blue Forester Subaru, and all of a sudden you see them everywhere. Oh wow, look, they have a Forester, a Subaru Forester, right? And ideas are like that too. Once you become a storyteller, you start noticing ideas everywhere. And as you say, they're just the starting point, because then the magic takes over.
So how long did it take you to write that first book?
The amazing thing about that book is that I wrote The Liar's Diary in 3 months. It's a feat I've never been able to reproduce, and I did it. That's a suspense novel, and I had really fun writing it. I had readers along the way, and they were really pulled into all the twists and turns and suspense. So they were demanding, I need the next chapter. Okay, where is it? So I had to keep That's a really great way to when you have readers waiting for something to get the juices flowing.
So, who were the readers that you had along that journey with you?
Well, a couple of friends, and actually, my teenage daughter was reading it, and I can still picture her now. She'd race into the house, throw her backpack down, and say, "Okay, where is it?" So she was the most compelling voice.
So, were you in the habit of sharing things that you wrote with other people at this time?
Well, I did. Like I said, whenever I'd write a short story, I would always submit it to magazines right away. And I did, to some degree, I was sharing things, but that was a different way of writing, sort of, how some of the old masters like Dickens, they used to write, that's how they wrote their books, right? They wrote them chapter by chapter and published
Right.
them went along. And then there was no room for writer's block there. If you have an audience, you know what happens next, right?
Well, and another thing is that a lot of times when you're writing a book, some people will maybe get to the middle and then start doubting what they wrote previously, and then they wind up going back and starting all over again, erasing, and the they never get to the end of it because it's just a constant, editing and editing and editing before it's even finished. And having some people along for the ride, so to speak, or like you said with Dickens, and publishing serially, there's absolutely no room for that because people are already invested in the story that you've begun telling them. So that's kind of having other people to keep you motivated, but also to sort of have to answer to it in a way,
Yeah,
that can be a powerful thing.
it is a very powerful thing, very, very powerful, and all those uh, deadly processes that you just described. I've done those many times, getting to the middle of the book and realizing you're totally lost and deleting the whole thing, and you need to want to tell it from another perspective. And as a matter of fact, when I was writing All the Children Are Home, I did that several times. And I eventually I had 857 pages that added up to nothing. Um,
Oh no.
a lot of character study, and I didn't know if it would ever be a book. And then a writer friend said, "Well, send me the first chapter," and I didn't even feel comfortable doing that. She said, "Come on, come on." She really urged me to do that, so I did. And then she said, "All right, send me the second chapter." And then, after about four chapters, she said, "Well, this is all really great, but you don't have a plot here." And then I think I just sort of started she said, "Send me another chapter next week that's really going somewhere." And then I think I reproduced what I did with the Liar's Diary, that I started sending her a chapter every week. And if I went off the beaten path, she'd tell me, "Well, what does this have to do with it?" Because I can tend to get so interested in all my secondary characters that well, I want to know all about them, and maybe the reader may not. So that is really, really helpful. And I don't think without that, I would have never gotten this book done either.
Writing can be such a solitary pursuit, and the majority of the book's life, it happens with just you in a room with a computer. Then of course when the draft is done, you send it to editors, and then some other people become involved in the process. But the vast majority of the time is just you alone with the characters, and maybe bringing in a little accountability along the way is not a bad thing. Even though I find I know myself, I find that very difficult to do. I find it very difficult to share what's going on with other people when I'm still in the process. That's maybe that's a pride issue that I need to work on.
Well, that's true. And I I started working with another sort of writing partner recently, and both of us have been doing that. We've both been saying, "Oh, well, I'll send it next week because I feel like it's not ready for anyone else's eyes but my own." Sort of like how you're describing your process. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does happen. So, I don't know, hopefully this is going it, but it does help if you can do it. It's been really great for me.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website. Developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates, PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.
So after The Liar's Diary, The Orphans of Race Point was your second book, is that right?
Yes.
What's the story behind that book?
Well, that story began with a character. I saw this little boy huddled in the closet, and I saw him so clearly. And I didn't know why he was there, but I had to find out, and I followed him. And it took a very long time to write that book because it's pretty, I would say, I didn't have anything that I was basing it on. It all came from imagination. Though, of course, once things are done, people start saying, when they're talking about the characters back to me or something, I go, oh, that sounds like my grandfather. So, everything comes from somewhere, but I didn't necessarily know where.
Gotcha. Since the Liar's Diary came about in such a fiery fashion of just, really pounding out the words, what was your experience with the second book? Did when it didn't come as fast, was there any point where you doubted yourself, where you kind of wrestled with the whole sophomore book process?
There were a lot of points like that, and then as a matter of fact, my agent tried to sell the book a few years before she actually did sell it, and she loved the book. She really believed in it, and she tried very hard with every publisher, large and small, and could not sell the book. But one editor made a suggestion. I had started the book at a different time point, and he said, no, this is all wrong. This person needs to come to Hallie, the female protagonist needs to be much stronger, and we need to start back in childhood, not tell the book in backstory. And, at the, books kind of get set in stone, Hank. You probably have experience sometimes with that. And so I said, no, I can't possibly do that. It has to be the way it is. And I put the book in the drawer, the old proverbial drawer for 3 years. And then my agent said, I really love that book. Do you think you could take that out and work on it again? And, I took it out and I realized that editor was absolutely right. And it worked. So you just really never know. Neither of my books sold the first time they went out. The same thing actually had happened with The Liar's Diary, that another agent tried to sell it a couple of years earlier and was unable to. And my agent took it out and sold it in 3 weeks. So you just really don't know. It's, you know how they always say finding that right editor is so crucial. And when you're getting a rejection letter that says, I'm just not the right person for this project, well, sometimes that's really true. You know, you really have to find that right editor who sticks with it and reads it and falls in love with it.
I love it. I love it. There was a subtle shift in tone from the first book to the second book, and what was the because the first book was more of a suspense thriller, and the second was more literary. What was your kind of journey from one genre to the other?
Well, really, I had started writing literary type of stories, and I really saw that as who I was as a writer, and then I had written a literary novel that did not sell, and I love to read in both genres, so I thought, I'm going to try this. This would be fun. And like, as I said, it really was fun to write. I loved writing it. I liked doing the twists and turns and surprising myself as I go along. And I loved writing for the audience, as I said. So it was a bit of a departure, but I loved doing it.
So your new book, which is available everywhere today, when people are hearing this episode, today is release day. So congratulations on publish day for All the Children Are Home. That's a big deal. We love to celebrate new releases here on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll be celebrating tonight.
So tell me where this story came from, because this is a story of foster families, which I find very intriguing. My wife and I, we have a big family. We have 5 kids, and we have a lot of nieces and nephews and things like that are around a lot, and a lot of times it feels like we have a big extended family that kind of comes and goes, and while not at all like foster families, in one sense it definitely feels like we have extended family that's not necessarily quote unquote ours. So that there are a lot of things that I can relate to in this book is what I'm trying to say. What was it about the idea of foster families that intrigued you to the point that you wrote a story about them?
First of all, your house sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds my former husband, he had grown up in foster care, and like Agnes, one of the main characters, he was an indigenous American, and he knew nothing about his heritage, or he had gone through a lot of neglect and abuse in his first 6 years. And a few years ago, he was dying, and he asked me if I would write a eulogy for him. And he said, and make sure you put in the greatest day of my life when I went into this family, and for the first time in my life, I sat down at a kitchen table and shared a meal with a family. He did not remember ever having done this ordinary thing that we all take for granted, right? And they had Franco-American spaghetti for dinner. That was such a vivid memory of the greatest day in his life. And so I, as an ex-wife, I didn't really think I was the person to write the eulogy, to give the eulogy, but instead I wrote a novel.
Oh, so you started connecting with personal stories that you had heard and that you had been kind of ingrained in the relationships that you had. Where did these characters come from? I understand the idea of fostership and extended family. But how did these characters come about?
Well, then once you go back to that the mystery that you described in the early part of our interview, Hank, that you don't really know where they come from. And, I started off, I didn't want, this is fiction, though it began with something from my life. And I wanted to tell Agnes's story, but gradually the parents, the mother and father, sort of took over the story. And became, I would say, though all the, it's a family. It's a very much of a family story, and they're all important. But the mother's voice became probably the strongest, and she begins and ends the book. And the father, though he does not have any chapters in his voice, he speaks very loudly through his actions. The sort of strong, silent type of a father that were present in the 50s and 60s, and that were glorified in the movies and everything, that we know him through his actions and his steadfast presence, and he speaks very loudly that way.
When you mentioned that that all of these characters came about, but the mother, her voice became really prominent. Is it that way when creating a new story? When you start thinking of a cast of characters, does one sort of stand up and start telling the story through their point of view? Is that something that has happened before?
I think for me, and I don't know how you've experienced this, but you have to get the right voice. That's really the critical thing. And I did start the story with various entry points, and none of them were right. And then I was going through that agonizing process we talked about in the beginning. But her voice was the right voice. But then I found, this is told in alternating voices, and though it's her story, she's probably the prominent protagonist, but the others, they all speak, and it was really finding who's the next family member who can carry the thread forward and keep the process going.
You wrestle with some really deep and complex issues in the book, but do it in a way that I empathize with the characters, and I'm all in with their family story. We deal with the ideas of how does a foster family deal with the reality of not knowing what the child that they take in is going to be like. I mean, that can be scary. When you have a child that you birth, my daughter just had a baby a couple of weeks ago, and we have this first granddaughter, and it's so fun because you look at this little baby, and she is a completely blank slate, and she comes with nothing, and everything she learns and all of that is going to come from her family and what we pour into her. With a foster family who then takes in a child, and we don't know the history. We don't know what has been poured into this child. There's a lot of that could be very scary, in a way. And then you have to deal with the idea of with foster parents. Sometimes you pour so much into this child, and then they have to leave. Either they go back to their birth parents, or they go to another family who adopts them, and then you're left with all these attachments, and you have to be willing to let go and let the process happen. There's so many complex emotions that get wrapped up into this, and you handle it in such a beautiful way that that has us engaged in the story all along. That I don't even know what to say other than this is such a huge undertaking, and you did it so deftly that I was all in all the way.
Oh, thank you so much for that, and congratulations on your granddaughter.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, for both the children and for the foster parents, there's all these unknowns, and they all come with their history, and they have to find a way to live with their history, their attachments that they may have had with their birth or not had with their birth family, or their own woundedness, and the children have to live with that, and the parents do as well. And there's a lot of critique of the foster care system, and but it's very difficult. And most people, there are some, I'm sure, that do it. There are definitely some who do it for the wrong reasons, but I think most people, they do it for the right reasons. But it's very challenging for all the reasons you named. That you're taking in some society's most wounded children, and you don't know even, you invest all this in them and you don't know if they can stay. And particularly in the 50s and 60s when this took place, they were very reluctant to terminate parental rights. That sometimes in the cases that I described, they would have done that, but they don't. They didn't do that back then. And so it's a constantly evolving thing. And I'm really glad to hear that came through, the complications of that. And I think there's such a lesson I felt that I learned from this family of just loving people where they are. And the Louie and Dahlia, the parents, they do that for each other because they both come with their own issues. And then they extend that to the children. And you raise them, you don't know how it's going to turn out, but everyone deserves a decent, loving childhood, and that's what they give them. And of course, with our own children, we do, it's much the same. You do the very best you can in your own, with all your own imperfections, and you don't know how it will turn out, but you do the very best you can. And but it's that much more challenging in a foster family.
Dahlia was one of the most fascinating characters, and the one that was so easy to relate to in the book. Did you find yourself commiserating with Dahlia along the way? Did you start seeing, pieces of yourself in her?
There probably were, yes. I think the challenge of all parents, Dahlia sits there. She's agoraphobic, and she's in the house all the time. I guess as a writer, I was relating to that. And she sits there with her jigsaw puzzles and her stack of books, and what she's really trying to add her own and all her own muck and issues. And she tries to figure out, what does this child need to make them thrive? What does each of these very different individual children need to make them thrive? And I relate to this as a mother. I think that's every parent's task, right? You find that you think you're going to mold your children into what you want them to be, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Hank, but they come and they're all very different, and you sort of have to follow, well, what does this one need? And offer various things and let them try them and find themselves. And so I did relate very much to Dahlia in that way. And maybe that's why her voice became so prominent, because I see the world as a mother.
Absolutely.
However, interestingly enough, doing these different voices, the voice that came to me most easily was probably the one most unlike myself, was the voice of the teenage boy Jimmy. His chapters just flew. I was possessed by Jimmy, and his chapters totally wrote themselves.
Love that. All the Children Are Home is available everywhere today. When you're hearing this, you can grab it in Kindle edition, or if you like to hold paper in your hands, you can get the hardcover also in audiobook format. We're going to put links to all those places in the show notes of this episode. I guarantee there's something in this story for everyone, whether you think this is your genre or not. Absolutely give it a chance. I know you're going to love it. Patry, if people are just learning about you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, is there a place where they can find you online?
There certainly is. It's patryfrancis.com, and I'd love for people to visit.
Excellent. We'll put links to that in the show notes as well. Patry, I love the book so much. Thank you for taking time to come on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Hank. This was wonderful. You and I could talk all day.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started. Are you looking for software that helps you bring your novel to life? Novelize is a web-based writing app which allows you to access your work on any device with a browser and an internet connection. Write from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Just get the novel written. Say goodbye to sticky notes. With our notebook on the side, you can keep track of all the important information you need to write your novel. We keep distractions to a minimum, help you track your progress, and encourage you to write more novels. You can even use the same notebook for your novels in a series. Outline, write, or organize your novel by switching between modes. You can write your outline notes while you're writing, and you can move scenes and chapters around anytime in the organize mode. Choose between the dark and light theme to help prevent eye strain so that you can stay immersed in your book. Novelize, the app for writers by writers.